Suddenly, an ear-piercing shriek slapped them right back into reality. Out of the bushes came a desperate cry, "Help me, it's got me." On an ordinary Sunday afternoon in 1890, deep in the desert of southern Arizona, two ranchers were returning home from the Huachuca Mountains. The ride was long, but their horses carried on steadily. The ranchers took in the familiar desert landscape as they passed. But just then, up ahead, they saw something that was in fact quite unfamiliar. As they rode closer, they could see more clearly and yet still had no idea what they were looking at. What lay before them could only be described as a monstrous creature. The ranchers thought it resembled an alligator, if only an alligator was 10 times the length and had the most massive wings they had ever seen. The ranchers froze, too stunned to move, but their unexpected intrusion startled the beast. It tried to fly away, but sheer exhaustion kept it from gaining more than a few short bursts of flight before falling back to the ground. The ranchers regained their composure and rode off after the formidable brute. The strange animal flew as fast as its tired wings would carry it, putting some distance between itself and its pursuers. The ranchers gave chase, and after several miles, finally drew near enough to take aim. They raised their rifles and with a steadying breath, opened fire on the winged creature. It was hit, but not debilitated. The monster swung around in anger, striking at the men. If it were not for the animal's weakened state, the men surely would have fallen victim to its wrath. But as it were, the ranchers evaded its attack, drawing their rifles upon it once more. With 2 loud blasts, the fierce predator fell to the ground. The ranchers hesitated before approaching, but as they stepped closer, they could see that it was over. The great monster was dead. The men set about examining the now lifeless beast. They determined the creature was about 90 feet long. The head alone was 8 feet long and full of razor-sharp teeth. Its wingspan measured in at a staggering 160 feet from tip to tip. The men truly did not know what to make of it. They also didn't know how they were going to get it into town. This story was printed in an 1890 edition of the Tombstone Epitaph newspaper, local to Tombstone, Arizona. But before long, the story had spread across the country. It was reprinted in a June edition of St. Paul Globe out of Minnesota and a July edition of the Democratic Northwest out of Ohio. It even made it to the Pittsburgh paper. But as quickly as it was becoming a nationwide phenomenon, it seemed to have fizzled out. Nothing more on the story was heard for some time. That is, until a 1963 issue of Saga magazine ran an article by Jack Pearl titled "Monster Bird That Carries Off Human Beings." Pearl curates a series of stories about monster birds across North America, including the Tombstone story. He brings readers back half a century ago to the once famous story from the Tombstone Epitaph, recreating imagery in their mind of the photo accompanying the article of the colossal bird nailed to a wall, while 6 men with outstretched arms stood fingertip to fingertip, demonstrating its immense wingspan. But in Jack Pearl's article, there was more to the story. A few years after the 2 ranchers shot down the monstrous beast of a bird, a group of boisterous bar patrons were recounting the tale. Well, more like mocking, really. But as luck would have it, one of the original ranchers was within earshot. He didn't take well to being insulted in this way. His voice bellowed across the bar. "If you're so smart, why don't you go out where we got the bird? There's plenty more of them nesting in the tops of them mountains. You'll see for yourselves." This rowdy bunch of men, filled with liquid courage, were certainly not about to back down from a challenge. So they set off at once. They traveled through the night, and as they were finally reaching the mountains, the sun was just beginning to creep over them. The sobering reality of their situation was setting in, quite literally. The drunken revelry of the night before had now turned into a throbbing hangover. The men decided the best course of action was to sleep it off before turning back around. They unfurled their sleeping bags and were settling in when nature came crawling. One of the men walked off a few yards into the brush to relieve himself. The others were drifting blissfully off to their dreams, when suddenly an ear-piercing shriek slapped them right back into reality. From out of the bushes came a desperate cry, "God help me, it's got me." All at once, the men jumped to their feet and grabbed their weapons and rushed off to fight what they presumed was a bear that had gotten the lone man. They followed the man's footsteps out of the woods and into a large clearing. But as they reached the middle of the clearing, the men all stopped short. The footprints just ended. The man was nowhere in sight. There were no animal tracks around. The man had just disappeared. The other men all glanced around wildly, and then, almost in unison, their line of sight shot straight upward, as if to confirm their admittedly unusual instinct to look skyward. The screaming started up again, but this time it was coming from high overhead. Almost as quickly as they started, the man's cries of let me go," faded away into the distance. He was never seen again. The other four men who had once mocked the plight of the original Tombstone ranchers now had an even less believable tale to tell. The Jack Pearl article not only gave us more to the original story, but it also gave us an idea what this gigantic flying creature might be. Pearl posited that it was a legendary Thunderbird. The Thunderbird is seen throughout Native American mythology. It is an enormous bird with supernatural power, so named for the thunderous sound it creates when flapping its wings. And it creates lightning by flashing its eyes. The specifics of the Thunderbird story vary slightly from tribe to tribe, but it is often depicted as a massive bird of prey, frequently an eagle. It is a protector of humans, ruler of the upper world, and fighter of the great horned serpent or underwater panther that rules the underworld. The Thunderbird lives in the clouds high above the tallest mountains. It controls the rain and the storms. Some legends say that the Thunderbird is so large that it could pick up a whale in its talons. So could this be what the two ranchers killed in Tombstone? And more importantly, did that story even happen? It had to have happened. There was photographic evidence of it. In a surprising twist, what actually became the biggest mystery in all of this is whether or not that photo ever existed. Jack Pearl's article in Saga magazine mentioned a photo, the one with a huge bird nailed to a wall while 6 men stood in front of it with arms outstretched fingertip to fingertip. Famed British biologist Ivan T. Sanderson claimed to have had a copy of the photo, only for it to be lost when he lent it out. Fortean researcher Richie Benedict recalls seeing Sanderson showing the photo on an episode of The Pierre Benton Show. The editors of Fate magazine maintained that they had once published the photo in an issue of their magazine. Mothman Prophecies author John Keel insisted that he had seen the photo and compared notes with others. Thousands of people remember seeing this photo and cite sources such as old books, men's magazines like True and Saga, collections of old Western photos, and even National Geographic. If so many people remember seeing the photo, surely it had to exist somewhere, right? Over the decades, dozens, if not hundreds, of versions of the Thunderbird photo have surfaced. One of them has to be the real one, right? Well, the thing is, people spent countless hours meticulously scanning through every single issue of True magazine, Saga magazine, and Fate magazine, and there was no photo. The episode of the Pierre Benton Show that supposedly had Ivan T. Sanderson on it with a copy of the photo was never found. The search for this photo really took off after the publication of Jack Pearl's Monster Bird article in the 1963 issue of Saga magazine. In that article, Pearl referenced the original Tombstone Epitaph article and the accompanying photo, except there never was an accompanying photo. See? Here's the article. No photo. One source even said that the Tombstone Epitaph wasn't even technologically capable of publishing photos in 1890 when the original article came out. Now, I don't know enough about newspaper printing technology of the late 19th century to confirm or deny that, but it sounds true to me. The poor Epitaph employees became so inundated with requests for this photo that they did an extensive search of back issues and files, and still, no photo. How could this be that so many people vividly remember seeing this photo? Authors Jerome Clark and Mark Hall suggest that perhaps the descriptive imagery in Jack Pearl's article was so vivid that it created the idea in people's minds that they had seen an actual photo. To quote from the Mothman fandom webpage, it literally creates a shared memory of something that does not exist. It is the Mandela Effect. So, what do you think? Is there really a photo out there somewhere of a giant bird shot down by ranchers? Or is it all just one big false memory? Personally, I think it says something that there isn't even a consensus on the creature in the photo. Half of the recreations of the photo are of a large eagle or raven-like bird. The other half look like pterosaurs. And now that I think about it, some of the photos show the creature nailed to the side of a wall, while others have it lying on the ground. But what do I know? In 1970, the Old West magazine reprinted the original story from the Tombstone Epitaph. It was then that a reader by the name of Harry McClure came forward. He had known the ranchers from the story later on in their lives. According to McClure, the ranchers had told him that they really did encounter a giant bird in the desert that day. But in reality, its wingspan was more in the range of 20 to 30 feet. An impressively large bird, to be sure, just not after hearing the bird had a 160-foot wingspan. McClure went on to say that the ranchers did chase the bird and shoot at it, but they never hit it. It flew off, and they rode back into town with no giant bird and no photo. Just a story. But about that photo, a blog entry on thunderbirdphoto.com notes that the San Francisco Examiner reprinted the original story from the Tombstone Epitaph on June 8th of 1890. And wouldn't you know it, there was a photo with it. Or rather, an illustration. So there was an original Thunderbird photo after all. Oh, I just love him so much. He's so derpy. I need to put it on a t-shirt or something. Well, that's it for this episode of AZ Unveiled. If you like the urban legend vibe of this story, let me know in the comments. If there's another story you'd like me to cover, let me know that too. And while you're at it, if you liked this video, please hit that like button to let me know. And if you want to hear more stories like this, hit that subscribe button too. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm Emily, and this is AZ Unveiled. I'll see you next time.